The sound that shouldn't exist. It was the middle of a cloudless afternoon in the Nevada desert, 1944. The air was unnaturally still. No birds, no wind, no human voices, just heat pressing down on the earth like an invisible blanket. Behind a chain-link fence, flanked by two armed guards, stood Friedrich Kessler, a 32-year-old German prisoner of war and former electrical engineer for Siemens. He had been transferred from a POW camp in Texas 2 weeks earlier, without explanation. No interrogation, no paperwork. Just one line from the officer escorting him. "You speak English. You follow instructions. That's enough." What he saw that day would haunt him for the rest of his life. Friedrich had been ordered to assist with acoustic calibration at a nondescript military facility, nothing more than a collection of concrete blocks, cables, and strange parabolic dishes pointing toward an empty testing field. Then, without warning, the device activated. No explosion. No visible projectile. Just a low-frequency hum, almost imperceptible, followed by a sudden collapse of everything in front of the dish. Wooden crates shattered from the inside. Metal sheets twisted like paper. Birds fell mid-flight. Friedrich stumbled backward, clutching his ears. Not from pain, but from a sensation far more disturbing. His skull vibrating, as if something inside him was being torn apart by sound alone. A technician in uniform calmly scribbled notes. Another turned a dial. No one else flinched. That night, Friedrich tried to ask what he had witnessed. The guard outside his room only said, "You didn't see anything. And if you did, forget it." But Friedrich never forgot. Years later, when he returned to Germany, he would search for any record of what he had seen. He found nothing. No mentions in declassified documents. No blueprints. No military program codes. Just silence. Too perfect to be coincidence. A war fought in silence. By late 1944, the United States stood on the edge of overwhelming military dominance. The D-Day invasion had been declared a success. The Pacific theater, though bloody, was steadily shifting in favor of the Allies. But back home, thousands of miles from the beaches of Normandy and the jungles of Burma, another war was unfolding. One that didn't rely on bullets or bombs, but on information, illusion, and psychological fracture. While Europe crumbled, America became a laboratory. Over 425,000 German prisoners of war had been transported to the United States by 1945. They were scattered across more than 500 camps from the swamps of Louisiana to the flat plains of Kansas. Some were interrogated. Most were assigned to work farms or repair roads under the Geneva Convention. But a select few engineers, technicians, linguists were quietly reassigned to special observation units. No such units appear by name in any official U.S. military records. But cross-referencing logistics data, train movements, and camp staffing manifest, particularly those from Camp Trinidad, Colorado, and Camp Huntsville, Texas, reveals anomalies. German engineers suddenly vanishing from one roster and appearing weeks later in unrelated Army Corps of Engineers reports, sometimes under code names. Friedrich Kessler, or someone fitting his profile, appears in at least 2 such transfers. The rise of sonic research. In 1942, the U.S. Army established the PSYOPs Task Group 9, a covert interdepartmental effort to explore non-lethal methods of combat, including acoustic weaponry. This group operated parallel to the more infamous Manhattan Project, and while it lacked atomic glamour, it attracted brilliant fringe minds, physicists from MIT, sound engineers from Bell Labs, and behaviorists from Columbia University. Their idea was radical. Could sound itself be used to disorient, incapacitate, or even destroy? By mid-1943, 2 major programs were underway. Project Black Noise, experimenting with infrasound frequencies that could induce nausea, fear, or hallucination in test subjects. Operation Glass Bell, a field test using large-scale parabolic dishes to direct concussive sound waves at fixed targets. Unlike radiation, these weapons left no obvious traces. No fire, no ash, just broken glass, collapsed lungs, and silence. These experiments were said to be conducted in Nevada and New Mexico, adjacent to the Manhattan Project testing zones. but compartmentalized beyond access, even from other military branches. The Vanishing Archive. After the war, Project Black Noise was scrubbed. No final reports exist. No declassified memos. Its personnel were absorbed into various post-war science bureaus. Funding trails go cold. Even the Pentagon's own historical office refers to the program as unverifiable. What survives, however, are fragments. A single memo from 1945 marked RE acoustic field deployment, harmonic yield testing, not recommended for Pacific theater. A 1947 letter from a U.S. military engineer stating, "Of all the devices we tried, the hum was the most terrifying. Not for what it did, but for what it promised." You at German POWs and technological fronts. It's often forgotten that German prisoners in America weren't just farmers or infantrymen. Many were highly trained specialists, mechanical engineers, radar operators, code breakers. The Third Reich had conscripted from technical universities as early as 1939. The U.S., aware of this, sought to exploit their expertise under strict supervision. But records remain contradictory. One file states a POW named F. Kessler was reassigned for labor and observation, while another classifies him as non-cooperative, no transfer authorized. One possible explanation: the second file was planted after the war to sever traces of a classified assignment. Why use sound? Unlike the atomic bomb, which required enormous infrastructure, acoustic weapons could be compact, repeatable, and perhaps most importantly, plausibly deniable. No mushroom cloud, no fallout, just a malfunction, a heart attack, a collapse. Psychological warfare had become the new frontier. The U.S. Office of Strategic Services, OSS, precursor to the CIA, had already experimented with sound-based interrogation, white noise chambers, and battlefield loudspeakers to demoralize enemy soldiers. Acoustic suppression devices were even deployed in small scale during the Battle of Manila, 1945, where American tanks reportedly used low-resonance bursts to clear buildings, though this claim remains unverified and officially denied. Compartmentalization and erasure. The key reason why Friedrich's story may have vanished lies in one word: compartmentalization. Military projects like Operation Paperclip, Project MK Ultra, and even portions of the Manhattan Project were deliberately structured so that no one person had the full picture. If someone spoke like a POW, they'd be labeled delusional, especially if the technology wasn't public knowledge. Add to that, no photographs, no technical manuals, no survivor testimonies from the American side. Just silence. Exactly the way a weapon like this would want to be remembered. The day the air collapsed, Friedrich didn't dream. Not anymore. The desert was too dry, too quiet, too surgical. At Camp Echo, sleep came in fragments. The guards never spoke German. The food was better than back in Europe, but it always tasted like cardboard. Even the barbed wire hummed with silence. But the facility beyond the fence that was alive. On the third week of his reassignment, Friedrich was handed a set of heavy-duty headphones and instructed to observe reaction timing for a control test. No weapon, no target. Just a flat concrete range and 3 massive parabolic dishes, each the size of a city bus, aligned toward a steel wall nearly 100 meters away. At 10:01 a.m., the technician gave a signal. There was no blast, no recoil, just a frequency so low it bypassed sound entirely and went straight to the bones. Friedrich gasped. It wasn't pain, it was displacement. His stomach twisted, his vision blurred. His fingertips went numb, as if the air had pulled itself inside out. The steel wall rippled like water. A second later, it buckled inward, without a single scratch on its surface. A lieutenant smiled. "Good spread," he said. "The human test." A week later, Friedrich saw something he was never meant to witness. An unmarked army truck arrived at the site. Inside were 3 men in civilian clothes, their wrists loosely bound. One of them was screaming in Spanish. Another was completely still, eyes wide with terror, before he even left the truck. They were not prisoners of war. They were test subjects. Friedrich tried to speak, but a guard grabbed his collar. "Not your job," he said. That afternoon, the dishes were recalibrated. The control booth lights dimmed. One of the officers in charge, Major Vincent Hale, wore a gas mask. Not for protection, Friedrich later realized. For anonymity. The test lasted 37 seconds. What Friedrich saw haunted him for the rest of his life. The body's betrayal. At first, nothing happened. Then the man on the left collapsed without a sound, not fainting, but crumpling, like someone had flipped a switch inside his spine. His fingers clawed at his own shirt, as if trying to reach his own heartbeat. The second man bled from the nose and ears simultaneously. The third ran. He made it 7 steps before he, too, collapsed, limbs twisted, eyes open, chest convulsing like a fish suffocating on land. The technicians remained silent. A medic approached, took notes, applied no aid. The men were removed. The ground was washed with hoses. No one spoke. Later that night, Friedrich vomited in his bunk. His cellmate, another German technician named Otto, said nothing, but handed him a dry towel. They both knew this wasn't just an experiment. It was a weapon being sharpened, the forbidden notebook. In the weeks that followed, Friedrich kept a hidden journal, scribbled on scraps of supply manifests and ration labels. He sketched the dishes. He counted the intervals between pulses. He noted which technicians blinked when the devices were active and which ones never did. But most chilling were the descriptions of the resonance shifts. According to Friedrich, the hum changes depending on the target. It adapts. On wood, it splits. On metal, it twists. On bone, it silences. He suspected that the weapon wasn't just sound, it was a calibrated algorithm, tuned to anatomical weaknesses. Certain frequencies made the diaphragm collapse. Others induced momentary blindness. Some, if amplified, could rupture eardrums or destabilize the cerebellum. Friedrich theorized correctly that the project was testing non-lethal total incapacitation, weapons designed not to kill, but to disable populations in seconds, and to do so without a trace. The unheard engineer. One afternoon, during a routine test on animal subjects, Friedrich met Dr. Irving Bellman, an acoustic engineer from Bell Labs. Unlike the others, Bellman didn't wear a uniform. He introduced himself softly, as if apologizing for his own existence. When Friedrich cautiously asked what the project was called, Bellman gave a thin smile. "It's not called anything. That's how it survives." Bellman didn't say more that day. But a week later, Friedrich noticed his name scratched out on the whiteboard in the control booth. The next week, Bellman was gone. Reassigned, they said, or silenced. The desert hole. Then came the incident no one could explain. Late one evening, Friedrich was awakened by sirens, real ones. Not practice. Real emergency. The sky was red, not from sunset, but from fire. One of the testing chambers had collapsed. Reports said a technician miscalibrated the dish. The blast zone left a perfect crater, 11 feet wide, with no debris. No sound was recorded. No bodies were recovered. Within 48 hours, the entire test site was sealed. Camp Echo was shut down. Friedrich and the remaining special POWs were loaded onto a military train bound for Nebraska. No explanation. No debriefing. His notebook was confiscated during a routine search. He never saw it again. A whisper after the war. After his release in 1946, Friedrich returned to Munich. He worked as a mechanic, spoke little of the war, and lived alone. But he never let go of what he had seen. In 1951, he contacted a journalist in Hamburg, sharing pieces of what he remembered. The story was dismissed as conspiracy. "Crazy POW with trauma," they said. He tried again in 1963, writing to a Swedish physicist known for researching sonic thresholds in biology. The response? "Your description matches some of the early effects observed in infrasonic testing, but we assumed those reports were exaggerated." Perhaps not. In 1972, Friedrich died of a cerebral hemorrhage. His death certificate was routine. His apartment, when cleared, revealed nothing unusual except one item: a single photograph, slightly blurred. A parabolic dish in the middle of a desert, scorched at the base. handwritten in German on the back. Wenn das die Zukunft ist, dann werden wir es nicht hören. If this is the future, we won't hear it coming. The science of silence. The world remembers Hiroshima. It remembers Nagasaki. But what it doesn't remember, or was never allowed to, are the alternative weapons. The ones that didn't make mushroom clouds. The ones that didn't glow. The ones that didn't even make a sound. The weapon Friedrich Kessler described wasn't magical. It wasn't theoretical. It was physics weaponized in a way only a nation with near unlimited industrial capacity could afford to attempt. And most crucially, it was deniable. The physics of destruction without fire. Infrasound sound waves below 20 Hz is imperceptible to human hearing, but not to the human body. These low-frequency waves can cause disorientation, vertigo, nausea, anxiety and panic attacks, even unconsciousness, if focused and amplified. More importantly, infrasound can resonate with internal organs. Like a singer shattering glass with pitch, focused infrasound can disrupt the rhythm of the human heart or destabilize the cochlear fluid in the inner ear, causing hallucinations, fear, and collapse. In the 1930 seconds, German scientist Vladimir Gavreau accidentally discovered these effects while experimenting with ventilator systems. In 1942, American engineers at Bell Labs recreated some of his early devices, embedding them in military research proposals under vague names like tactile wave field modulation and non-ballistic barrier field generation. The psychological advantage. But the sonic weapon's true strength wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Imagine a battlefield where there's no gunfire. Enemies drop to their knees, clutching their heads. Buildings shake, but no explosives are found. No blood, no shrapnel, no trace. Such a weapon causes fear through confusion, paralysis through unpredictability. The enemy doesn't know what to defend against. You can't armor yourself against nothing. This aligns perfectly with U.S. military strategy from the mid-1940 seconds onward. Win the mind first, then the battlefield. This was the dawn of psychological warfare, and sound was its sharpest invisible blade. Why was it erased? If such a weapon was real and there's strong evidence it was, why was it erased? 3 reasons. 1. Uncontrollability. Early sonic tests showed massive unpredictability. Slight changes in humidity, temperature, or wind shifted the wave patterns, sometimes bouncing back toward the source. During a 1945 trial in Arizona, a technician reportedly suffered irreversible inner ear damage from resonant reflection. 2. Geneva implications. The Geneva Conventions strictly regulate weapon types. Any device causing indiscriminate, uncontrollable suffering, especially one invisible and untraceable, would be flagged as a cruelty weapon. Much like chemical or biological weapons, sonic arms would risk international backlash. So the project was not discontinued, it was disavowed. 3. The atomic overshadowing. In August 1945, the atomic bomb changed everything. Why promote a weapon that disorients when you now have one that vaporizes? Sonic weapons became redundant. In a world that had seen Hiroshima, funding dried up, documents were buried, and witnesses like Friedrich were discredited or silenced. Comparative power. Sound versus atom. Criteria: atomic bomb, sonic weapon. Destructive radius vienas do 1050, 300 meters. Limited. Collateral damage massive selective, in theory. Visibility extreme flash, cloud, 0. No visual que. Detectability easy. Radiation seismic. Hard, no physical trace. Psychological effect, terror by spectacle, terror by confusion. Legal classification, controversial but legal, possibly illegal under Geneva. The chart shows what military analysts knew, but never published. Sonic weapons weren't meant to compete with the bomb. They were designed to operate in gray zones where war wasn't official, but influence was essential. Think coups, riots, occupations. Where else could it have been used? There are scattered post-war incidents that align suspiciously well with sonic weapon behavior, though never proven. Manila, 1945, multiple Japanese defenders were reported to have abandoned fortified positions after low rumbling sounds, despite no direct combat. U.S. records are silent on what caused it. Athens, 1946. British troops attempting to suppress a communist uprising claimed strange vibrations in alleyways that caused mass confusion. One soldier reported, "It felt like my lungs were being squeezed by the wind." No such device was found. Suyi, 1950. A South Korean intelligence report warned of a new North Korean psychological weapon, but declassified CIA files suggest the U.S. may have staged the event as a field test. Again, no formal admission, no follow-up, just doubt, echoes in modern times. Despite decades of silence, interest in sonic weapons resurfaced in the 21st century. LRAD, long-range acoustic device, used in Iraq, on cruise ships, and by police in U.S. protests. A focused beam of sound capable of causing pain or deafness. Havana Syndrome, 2016. Present. U.S. diplomats in Cuba and China reported dizziness, hearing loss, and cognitive fog suspected cause. Directed energy or acoustic attack. Active denial systems. U.S. crowd control weapons using microwave pulses to simulate burning on skin. Though not sound, they're part of the same spectrum of invisible, untraceable force. But nothing matches the total collapse of control described by Friedrich. What he saw was not about pain, it was about erasing agency, making the body betray itself, making the air an enemy. Why believe him? In 1997, a historian named Dr. Emily Krawitz found a footnote in a declassified Army Research Index. It referred to adaptive wave modulation equipment tested under foreign observation, Nevada range, 1945. She traced the file reference. It was missing, but in Friedrich's personnel file buried in an annex of the National Archives, she found one phrase, "Subject removed from witness pool, assigned to silent category, level 3. No explanation of what that meant, but it appeared in no other POW record. The pattern of the forgotten. It fits a broader pattern. Documents missing. Witnesses unaccounted for. Test sites sealed or repurposed. And a war memory curated only for what's convenient to remember." Friedrich's story isn't remarkable because of how loud it was. It's remarkable because of how carefully it was buried. A story erased not with fire, but with erasure itself. Forgotten frequencies. Unanswered questions. In the great theater of war, history tends to remember what it can see. Mushroom clouds, charging infantry, the raising of flags, the soundless, the invisible, the things that leave no footprint, those are quietly folded into the footnotes of forgotten science. But the human body remembers what the page forgets. More than a weapon. Friedrich Kessler never claimed to have seen a death ray. He never called it a miracle, or even a success. He described it with the precision of an engineer and the horror of a man who had seen something that should not have existed. A weapon that didn't burn or bleed. A weapon that collapsed buildings, not with shockwaves, but with dissonance. A weapon that turned the act of hearing into a form of surrender. And most terrifying of all, a weapon that could be denied because it left no trace. What makes a memory dangerous? Kessler's experience reminds us that truth alone is not enough to shape memory. Power shapes memory. Silence enforces it. Why was there no follow-up? Why were there no survivors testifying to its use in court? Why does the U.S. military maintain no official record of the program, even though fragments of funding trails exist? Because in a world reeling from the atomic bomb, this weapon, this quiet thing, was too dangerous in a different way. Not catastrophic, but controllable. Not flashy, but insidious. Not a deterrent, but a tool of quiet influence. It couldn't win a world war, but it could win a town, a riot, a government, or a border, without firing a shot. The vanishing line between fiction and history. Today, when we hear of acoustic weapons or non-lethal suppression, we think of sci-fi. We laugh off stories of microwave attacks and psychological destabilizers as paranoia. But paranoia, sometimes, is memory trying to survive denial. The government has long understood that the best weapon is one the enemy never believes existed. And in that regard, sonic experimentation, if not the weapon itself, was a profound success. The perfect crime of war. If Friedrich was lying, why would his story match emerging declassified technologies decades later? If he was mistaken, why did multiple documents now lost reference phrases only he ever used? If he was delusional, how did he predict resonant collapse patterns now confirmed in scientific literature? And if he was telling the truth, then what else have we forgotten to hear? When silence becomes the weapon, there is a reason we don't talk about sound as a weapon. Because we want sound to be communication, not coercion. Because the idea that your breath, your blood, your thoughts can be turned against you by a hum is not just terrifying, it's plausible. And plausibility is always more dangerous than fiction. Final question for the audience. So now we ask, was Friedrich Kessler a deluded prisoner, haunted by shadows of war, or the only man brave enough to describe a weapon we were never meant to remember? You decide. Let us know what you believe. Was the U.S. sonic weapons program real? Did it end or just go deeper underground? Is silence sometimes the loudest proof of truth? Comment your theory below. We'll be watching.